This is Martin Giles of the Guildford Dragon News, and I'm with former Borough Councillor John Rigg, who's still the chair of the Guildford Vision Group. John, thank you for giving your time for this interview to the Guildford Dragon. Welcome back. And there are two things I'd like to talk to you about. Firstly, the House of Fraser and what's happening to those premises, so key on Guildford's High Street. The fact that they remain empty, although it's only one shop, it obviously has a bigger impact because of the size of it, and gives an impression that I think a lot of people think there are more empty units on Guildford High Street than in fact there are. So, what do you know about? I understand that you have made an attempt to try and get people interested there. What can you tell us?
Yes, it is a heartbreaking situation. It's so important for Guildford. It impacts on both North Street and High Street. And if it carries on deteriorating, it really is going to be very bad for the town. Yes, I got involved with a developer who I've known years ago, and he was aware of my interest in Guildford. He came up with a very good scheme which involved the upper floors, which are the real problem for these old department stores. Retailers don't want these huge upper floors. What do you do with them? And he
And
came up.
sorry to interrupt, but as I understand it, the House of Fraser premises in particular are an issue because they're so deep and it's difficult to get natural light into most of the site.
Exactly right. And so many other potential uses that you'd look for when regenerating a development like that are not possible because of that very point. But the developer and the architects came up with a great scheme for a health centre on the upper floors and senior living with nice balconies, and it was really very, very good. But the need for a user for the ground floor and the basement for retail was one of the challenges. And then, of course, you've got to find a long-term investor who's willing to put up 60, 70, 80 million pounds. They worked very, very hard, and Guildford Borough Council were extremely helpful in trying to find the right way to develop the site and comply with planning. But at the end of the day, the vendors, Canada Life, couldn't wait any longer. They have now, I gather, and I've only heard this secondhand, agreed terms with another party. I know nothing about the other party, so we'll have to wait and see. But it continues to be a very serious concern for myself and Guildford Vision Group.
Well, for everyone in Guildford, I think.
Yeah.
I think everyone would like to see something happen there because it is such a blot on the high street landscape. Okay, well, that's that. Thank you very much for that update. And now you've also written an opinion piece on the flood alleviation scheme and your concern about the slow progress that's making. What do you want to say about that?
Well, for 100 years, Guildford has not had a visionary master plan, not until 2022. And that envisaged opening up the riverside, riverside homes, paths, parks, cycleways, absolutely a superb piece of work. But it has no planning standing. In other words, and for it to have any standing at all, it needs a simple motion of council to go through saying they support, at least in strategic terms, how the plan is developed. And secondly, though, most of the sites which are owned by the council are subject to flooding, so they can't be developed. And then there are other roads like Mary Road and Lees Road that are very at risk on flooding. And so when we presented the master plan to the Environment Agency, who are responsible for designing flood schemes, they welcomed it and were incredibly enthusiastic and said, yes, this is the type of scheme which we can give support to. So they have embraced it and have spent many hundreds of thousands. But for it to happen, we need government grants. Now, previously, you're only entitled to 50% government grant. Now you're entitled to 90% government grant. But the government will only give grant to people who show they are seriously up for it. And that means one or two things. Firstly, that there is a planning consent for it. So the Guildford Borough Council have to work on granting planning consent for it. And secondly, that the council will put their own hands in their pockets and come up with a contribution, somewhere between 1% and 10% of the cost. And so what you've got to do again, though, you've got to get it a motion through council. It's an obvious protection to make sure that councils just don't make lots of noise, but don't actually get a formal approval from the full council. And all three things are missing at the moment. There's no endorsement of the master plan. There's no endorsement or grant of planning consent, and there's no formal provision to contribute to the however many tens of millions it costs. And it's such a fantastic opportunity for the town. You know, we've been flooding. The Great Flood of Guildford was in 1900, and we've had floods every year. And with climate change, it's going to get much worse. So here we are. It's all on a plate. The government of making it as easy as possible, but we've got to do some simple things. And I'm just a bit bewildered why these things haven't happened.
But already the Guildford Borough Council doesn't have full authority, does it, anymore?
No, no, it doesn't. But it does have authority. It does have an obligation to do what it needs to do
But
in
let me
any
just, if I
particular
can just
year.
explain, because um, already the new West Surrey Council, which doesn't yet exist, has to give the okay to anything that is proposed.
I'm not sure. I think that's something that involves capital expenditure.
Right,
I'm pretty sure you're right. But in terms of deciding we're in favour of a flood scheme, and
right.
it's a good thing to do, and that I absolutely accept that Guildford couldn't make the financial commitment now. But in fact, they're not being asked now. All
Right.
they're being asked is, can they put something through the council saying their support, and they are minded to grant, and as they know they're going to be abolished, they will leave it to the later authority, which will be West Surrey, but they're up for it, and that's missing.
So you think it's important to have it on the record?
It's got to be on the record that the Environment Agency have to go to government with the grant application, where there's a long queue of authorities who won't even hesitate. They'll be fighting to get to the front of the queue. We have a great opportunity, but the Environment Agency have to go to government with two things for in their business plan. One, a planning consent, and two, that the local authority are minded, or in fact, if Guildford wasn't being abolished, they intended to contribute grant. And Surrey County Council, I'm pretty sure, will come in because they are the other flooding partner of Guildford Borough Council. So it's all there. It's a zero cost currently. They can get these simple motions through council, but we're running out of time. And once the new council comes along, if nothing's happened, if their desks are clear, they'll forget about this, and the Environment Agency will say, well, we've wasted 2 or 3 years with Guildford. Will we do it again in the future? And
So why would the Borough Council be dragging their feet on this?
I think they're, not surprisingly, I suppose, very concerned about the abolition of the council and whether they're going to be jobs for them in the new council, and whether to form a parish council or not. All these things that often
Distracting
come
them.
higher up the political
Agenda.
appetite.
Okay. Now, I don't want to let you go without asking you if it's okay about your recent trip to Ukraine. Can you now it's not the first time you've been there. In fact, I think is it the fourth or
Fourth.
fourth?
Fourth.
Yes. And you take 4x4 vehicles for the Ukrainians to convert into ambulances for evacuating casualties. That's correct, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Yes. So what are your impressions on this last trip? How did you find things there?
It is really, really worrying, and they are doing their very best to cope with the war and to cope with the bombardments that are occurring. Of course, near the front. In the First World War, for instance, the two fronts would be a very short distance apart, 100 meters, 200 meters. Now with drones, it's anything up to 25 miles that the drones can. And then with the missiles as well, the Russians are able to hit virtually anywhere in the Ukraine. And of course, when you've got, although we're thankfully into spring now, a few weeks ago it was minus 15, minus 20, and no heating in the housing because a lot of them have heating blocks which supply a whole estate or a whole area. And so it's really been a worry. We took out probably 20 boxes of aid in the vehicles this time, and they're always terribly pleased, and they particularly want to make the point how important it is that they see British people supporting Ukraine. They do feel very much alone.
Why particularly British people?
Well, because we are more noticeable
Oh.
on each of the trips that I've made and meeting some of the frontline troops. Um, uh, they do get help from other countries, but the British seem to be way ahead.
Well, that was, it's excellent work you do there, John. So thank you. I would say thank you to you for doing it, and good luck for any future trips. And if anyone wants to help, how could they support the endeavours?
Well, we work with a company called Mission Ukraine, a not-for-profit organisation, and you can Google Mission Ukraine, and I'm sure they'd be delighted to have any donations that people feel minded to send.
Okay, John Rigg, thank you very much.
Thank you, Martin.